My boy Seiya is just, he's such a wild card. I know sort of what I'm gonna get with him each week, but then there's always something. And this week's episode, it's gotta be the slaps. I wasn't expecting the first one, but the countless times after, and then just having our goddess refer to her as like getting the basically pen saying you're a little dog, go into your timeout corner. It's like this show from its very similar Konosuba gender equality to just breaking the hearts and mending them all within a matter of episodes of someone who's trying to stab you and then gets butterflies in her stomach because you patted her head, told her to comb her hair. You have new thirsty goddesses who are teaching you archery, or a little bit more if you don't want to handle a bow. There might be something else you can handle as she, seductively licks an apple as she probably wants to kill you. She might be working for the Demon King, or maybe she wants you all to herself. I don't know, but this is a ladies' man. The goddesses are thirsty as hell for Seiya, and Seiya is walking all over them with no regard for their feelings whatsoever. It really lives up to its comedy tag, doesn't it? This show is just great, and I think it was last week where I mentioned how there's plenty of shots within this show that are unrefined where they pull back a lot and it doesn't look all that great. And in most serious anime's hands, it would feel very jarring. But you have shots like this in the beginning or countless shots throughout the episode, and then you'll get a shot like this. And that's where it's like, you just naturally are assuming that at some point you're going to have something that is so ridiculous, so stupid, so basic in design, that all those shots that, yes, were production missteps, they actually aid this series far more than it hinders it, and I love it. This episode was just fantastic. It was actually quite interesting because, the first third of the episode was a lot more, it's not really serious in tone, but a lot more not as many jokes are coming your way, and it was more like, hey, this is the next opponent that we're going to be facing, which is a bunch of flies. And I did kind of like this idea for the opponent because even though they're not ridiculous in size or power, there's just so many of them and their speed is just unbearable that they become worse than that army that he one-shotted episodes back. And it's just interesting to see how he's just kind of cautiously watching as 100 soldiers are dropped to their deathbed and you have the forest raining blood in reverse fireworks, right? And then you're just having this commander super depressed and trying to inspire her troops, and the morale is just painfully low. And I'm like, okay, we're definitely getting into a more serious episode. I wasn't expecting any of the comedy in this episode. I actually was expecting there'd be a couple of moments that sure would get a chuckle at me, but just based on the intro and how they were setting it up, these characters were pretty damn depressed or just down in their dumps, besides obviously Seiya, because he's always cool, calm, and collected, as there ain't no rest for the wicked for this man. He always has to play his hands right, and this episode would be no exception. But, when they all started gathering around and they started discussing the plans and how Seiya was like, alright, I'm gonna leave for 3 days, and, they're progressively getting more and more confused of what? That entire buildup between a warrior who apparently is the daughter of, apparently, if you remove Seiya, the strongest man in this kingdom, that for some reason he can't leave his post. It was so interesting to see because in a lot of ways, she represents what a lot of protagonists would be in The Cautious Hero, or any series like it, where a hero is summoned and they're gun-ho to save everyone, make sure that they, if there's an opponent, it doesn't matter if we're unprepared, let's go fight it. And that mentality can actually be a decent quirk, but it obviously will lead everyone to their death. And it was interesting how she really pissed Seiya off. You could immediately tell that, and I really like how, even though he was being his usual blunt self, you could definitely tell that he was actually annoyed with her, as if what she's saying is so irrational that I don't even want to deal with this. And of course, they naturally are building up that comedy tension to the point where he eventually slaps her, and you're just like, okay. But then, when the Cautious Hero really gets going, the multiple, they don't even show, you just hear it in the background, you're hearing the slaps, you're hearing, you'll cut back to her face, it's even more bruised, and it's like, what the hell are we watching right now? The characters don't know what to say on both sides, and it was just the build-up, the momentum. One of the funniest things I've seen in The Cautious Hero, I honestly have to say, and there's been some great comedy, but it was just the comedic direction was so on point, with not even showing the slaps. It was just you were hearing it in the background, you were seeing the reactions from the characters, and that told more of a story than actually seeing the hits themselves. Because past one moment, they were just you kept cutting back to how did she get this wounded? And then by the end of it, she's just a puppy. She's a puppy that needs to be in timeout. And everyone's like, what are we watching? Like, why did this happen? And then they just leave, right? It's like, be back in an hour. This show knows so well how to balance the absolute absurdity with actually a character moment, as Seiya does get to reflect that she actually pissed him off with her carelessness of just wanting to go gung-ho, not prepare. It was like really a nice Seiya moment, as we got just the goddess and everyone like that just utterly dumbfounded and shocked at what the hell they just saw. And I was so happy. I think it was when they were originally leaving and the whole yandere goddess was like on her rampage. I said I really wanted to see her more, and I'm glad a few episodes later, we got the continuation without even Seiya realizing we were about to go down this road. Because everyone needs to train, right? Even though Seiya's the only one who probably in his mind wants to train, because, okay, do you have guns in this world? Do you have, like, patriots? No. Okay, we can't break the world building for this world, so what do we have? We have Bo, so obviously the goddess of archery, right? And then all the other characters are trying to do their thing. One is just wanting to eat candy, the other is like, oh, I'll find a god to train with. And I really did like how you have the one who's just like, hey, I can unlock your like special talents, and there's like this moment where our main goddess is like, hey, isn't that kind of like breaking the rules? It's just like those little lines that almost feel like fourth wall breaking, as if it's like what the viewer's gonna be thinking, like, hey, isn't this actually like breaking the rules of the game pretty much? I just love those moments. But to have the continuation of just rampaging goddess, writing kill all over her walls, and everyone is just terrified that if Seiya was to come back here, it would be all out war. And I knew it wouldn't. I knew either after what we saw that, you know, another female is gonna get brutally beaten, or Seiya would work his magical charms, right? And I just love how, like, they go so horror. They go so horribly directed to make it feel like, is she gonna die? She didn't even break her heart, but it feels like she's about to be a test subject on how to kill the man who broke her heart. And just that buildup of being like, did you really think I wouldn't believe that you came here alone? And just, I don't even know what Seiya is thinking half the time. I honestly don't know if he realizes how many people are just latched onto him with hard eyes, or if he just naturally is doing this, but just like, you look horrible, as he like starts kind of combing her hair, and she just immediately forgives him. This man has so many moves despite being such a dick, and I love it. This character has so many ways to just incorporate himself in the most ridiculous, absurd, and such douchiest ways, and it makes this show what it is. And what I really appreciate was, even though there was so much Seiya charm, I mean, this man, from smacking around that girl to just, you know, mending the heart, and I don't know if that heart's gonna stay mended, as I imagine there's gonna be some more heartbreak eventually, because if he leaves without her again, I wouldn't be surprised if she goes back on a tornado spree of knives in hand as everyone else in the room just kind of flees in terror. But it was so nice to have those like simplistic moments where, you know, you could have Masha or even Alulu, and just their natural comedy and banter, from, you know, being so depressed that you're useless that you're gonna eat sweets, or you're trying to find someone who's going to help you, and it's like, oh, this goddess clearly can't help me, as you're basically disregarding the life of everyone else because you have a yandere goddess on the loose. Or one of my favorite little side little jokes is how you have to get trained with a bow before you can basically train with the master of said bow. And just as she's trying to explain something that was quite hard for her to master, Seiya does it as like, okay, so you just gotta put your hand out, oh, he already has the bow, and just the utter defeat. It's the little moments that just sell this as being so goddamn funny. It's just, even though the first third of the episode was actually dry in comedy, but actually interesting in world mechanics, as you're seeing all the flies, the more serious atmosphere, what this army is going through, and just the carnage that was unfolding. Actually, one of the most bloody scenes that we've seen, as bodies were just hitting the floor and blood was raining down as if it was a rainstorm. And then it naturally transitions into Seiya breaking down this commander who is, you know, being too rash, too emotional, and Seiya very much doesn't agree with being emotional because it won't do anything good for the battlefield, as he then transitions to complete and utter absurdity with comedy, and very brutal comedy, might I add, to then just the whole yandere resolution, or at least temporary, because I feel like this girl just has a band-aid on her heart, and knowing Seiya, he's gonna rip it off and probably rub salt into her wounds. I really don't feel like this series has disappointed as of late. When it wants to make you laugh, it generally will. There's so many great big comedy moments, but there's all these little moments that build up in the background that, even if you remove those giant did he really just hit her, or did he really just pat her head and she's now forgiving him after the goddess was terrified for her life? There's those little moments with our side cast or just some one-off lines that will make us laugh, and then you look at what actually the story is building up to in this episode, and the whole idea of the fly army was actually pretty creative. It's not anything I think many people would have expected after just fighting a dragon, right? You would think something more monstrous, more frightening, but a flock of flies with that much speed, they actually would be pretty damn terrifying, and seeing what they did to that army, a trained army at that, it's like, yeah, that's actually pretty creative and a nice little curveball that probably not many people were expecting, at least I know I wasn't. But what did everyone think of this week's episode? Did you love it as much myself, and what was your favorite moment? I have a pretty strong feeling I know what a lot of people are going to say, but whatever you're feeling, do let me know down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.